Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I realize it's always a little challenging just after lunch, but I can promise you the speaker I will be introducing will get you back on the edge of your seat. Just don't fall off. I'm Frank van der Post, president of Breezeline, and under the leadership of Louis Audet, Cogeco's chairman of the board, and Philippe Jetté, our chief executive officer, our parent company, we have a long-time supporter of the World Strategic Forum here in the US as well as in Canada. I am pleased to be here at this year's forum and introduce our next speaker. The Breezeline name may be new to you. Early this year, Atlantic Broadband rebranded to Breezeline, a change that acknowledges our growth beyond the East Coast through recent acquisitions we have done in, for example, Ohio, as well as conveying our commitment to delivering simple, easy experiences for our customers at every step of the journey with us. The theme for this year's forum is investing in trust. As a leading internet, TV, and voice provider in the US, Breezeline works every day to earn the trust of our customers and communities by investing in delivering a great experience they expect and deserve. That's why we are investing in network reliability and resilience to meet today's demand. That's why we're investing in new services like fiber to the home, IPTV, and hosted voice for business. That's why we're investing in customer care and digitalization initiatives to deliver more convenient support options for our customers. And that's why we're investing in our own colleagues to ensure they are engaged, supported, and empowered to deliver the kind of service that will delight our customers and create long-term loyalty. We are also mindful of our responsibility to the wider community. That's why we're investing in renewable energy and energy-efficient projects and work towards a net zero future. And that's why we're investing in rural broadband, expansion initiatives with partnerships with federal, state, and local stakeholders to bring connectivity to hard-to-reach areas. And that's why we're also investing in our communities by supporting local businesses and a range of non-profit organizations, including those devoted to digital literacy, online safety, those promoting a healthy tech-life balance, and those promoting science and technology careers for young women. In each case, I said we are investing. That's because this investment is in trust, not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing commitment that we make every day as we work to serve our customers and communities. It's good for our customers, it's good for our communities, and it's good for the environment and essential for strong business growth. That's why I was very excited I learned I would introduce Mauricio Ramos, Chief Executive Officer of Millicom. Since joining Millicom in 2015, he has transformed his fixed internet and mobile business to build the digital highways that connect people, improve lives, and develop communities. He has helped expand Millicom's presence across Latin America through the acquisition of Cable Onda, the group's first asset in Panama, and the acquisition of Telefónica's mobile subsidiaries in Panama and Nicaragua. He also led the company to being traded on the Nasdaq. Millicom has also invested in its colleagues, being recognized as one of the top 25 best multinational workplaces in Latin America and in the Great Place to Work survey. Mauricio is also a member of the board of directors of Charter Communications and was elected as chair of the US Chamber US-Colombia Business Council. That's a mouthful. Which is dedicated to strengthening the economic and commercial relationship between the US and Colombia. Before joining Millicom, he was president of Liberty Global's Latin America division, a position he held from 26 until February 2015. He has received a degree in economics, a degree in law, and is a postgraduate degree in finance law from Universidad de los Andes in Bogota. I'll let him tell you more about all that Millicom is doing to connect people and communities and move forward to a net zero future. It is my great pleasure now to introduce Mauricio Ramos. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It is what I call the siesta slot. So every now and again, I'll shout just to make sure everybody's still awake. And Frank, thank you very much for that very, very kind introduction. Thank you to the World Strategic Forum for inviting us today, for all of its sponsors, and for the organizers to have us today. Being that we are a media, telecoms, and IT company, I will be using state-of-the-art technology to help deliver my conversation today. There we go. Yes, never leave home without the iPad 50. Very good. So despite that introduction, I wanted just to give you an idea of what Millicom is, what Tigo really is. We are basically an operator in 9 countries throughout Latin America. We do mobile, and like Breezeline, we do pay TV and broadband residential as well. We operate in 9 countries, about 40 million mobile users, and about 4.5 residential broadband consumers. We also offer services to small, medium, and large enterprises, about 10,000 of the largest corporations in the 9 countries we operate, and about 320,000 small pymes or SMEs. So we are a large telco or cable co or fiber co in the markets we operate. So if you're a European, you think of us as a Telefonica or a Vodafone. If you're America, you would think of us as Breezeline or AT&T. And if you are Latino, hopefully you've come across Tigo, which is a brand name in many of the markets we operate in. We just happened to run the business largely in a distributed manner. So I was very glad to receive the invitation today. And I think the question that I was asked to answer is, or at least that's what I understood it to be, how did we get here in terms of embracing a net zero commitment in the markets we operate and externally, and what happens going forward? So that's the question that I will try to answer today and hopefully do a decent job at it. As I said earlier, we're a publicly traded company. We trade both in the US, New York's NASDAQ, and in the Stockholm NASDAQ. And we've made external commitments to net zero and diversity and inclusion. So they weigh heavy on what we do because they're made externally. So I will do this the way sometimes movies do it. I'll give you a snapshot of where we are today. And then I'll take you back on where we were some 5, 6, 7 years ago and bring you back to how we got to where we are today. And then most importantly, I'll do my best to try to fathom how we're going to achieve these goals that we have committed into the future. So today, Tigo Millicom has 4, and I'm going to try to use external benchmarks or ratings just to give you an idea of how seriously we've taken our commitments. We do our carbon disclosure project, we do our CDP. Our rating is B, which for those of you who like this would understand that this is above our industry peers. And we operate in markets that are not developed economies, meaning we're in Honduras, Guatemala, Panama, Colombia, Bolivia. So we take pride in this first ranking. For those of you who follow the MSCI ESG rating, we're at AA, which proudly again would put us above many of our peers, even some of the American telcos. Again, although we operate in markets in which these things are newer, harder. And earlier this year, we committed to presenting and having our SBTi objectives validated. By now, they've been presented externally, we've committed to them externally, and they have now been validated. So externally, earlier this year, we said that we would be net zero by 2050, which means that we would cut our greenhouse emissions by half by 2030. It also means, although this hasn't been said publicly, that we have to have a path towards doing that, which means that we have to cut our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% by 2030 and cut our scope 3 emissions by 20% by 2035. You'll hear me talk a lot later about having stuff that is made public, explicit, and goal-oriented. That's how we keep people working towards those goals. Now, we're only one of 3 telcos in the region, Latin America, and one of 38 operators, any industry, in the region who's made these commitments. And I say this last piece not to pump our chest or to proudly say, but because we think being a good leader means inviting others to join. And the more, the merrier in this journey, so that there can be more than 38 companies, that's not a lot for all of Latin America, that have actually made explicit net zero commitments. When you think about it, 38 is not a big number. So we need a lot more to make this explicit. So earlier this year, we had our Investor Day. Our Investor Day, we put out our 3-year financial and operational targets. Just one piece of paper after 4 hours of presentations in which we said to the markets, these are our 3-year operating cash flow and equity free cash flow objectives to our investors. And within those priorities, as part of the key things we should externally be measured by, we also said that we would put 2 ESG metrics publicly. 1, the net zero commitments that I just made, and 2, our commitment to diversity and inclusion, and we publicly said that we would have 50-50 parity by 2030. The reason we did this is because an external commitment helps us align all our stakeholders. It helps us internally focus our workforce into what we're doing it and why we're doing it. But it also makes it very, very relevant if, like we did, we put it amongst our top priorities. These 2 objectives are amongst our top 10 priorities, externally and internally. It also started out one of what I deem to be the most important snowball effects of this. I truly, really got my audit committee to focus on this. Because the minute it was made external, the audit committee realized that we need to really track it, measure it, and be able to present it externally. And I use it as an example to get you an idea of once you are really, really willing to walk the talk, things get started. Because the commitments that you make externally become internal, become measurements, and become tracked. So how did we get to the point that we would make these commitments externally in a region like Latin America, in which few are making them, and with the level of conviction that they can be tracked and measured and put into our compensation targets? The first thing we did about 7 years ago when I joined the company as a CEO was we went in as a team and tried to figure, publicly traded as we were, working for our shareholders as we are, what really was or is our purpose as a company. We really did go through a process of what is it that we mean to our societies. Of course, we need to provide a return of capital to our investors, of course. But what is it that these communities ultimately need us to do? And be mindful, I'm speaking of El Salvador and Honduras, and Costa Rica, and Bolivia, and Paraguay. And we came out with a clear purpose that is still used today in every presentation that I make when there's something more than my iPad 50. We build digital highways that connect people and develop our communities. And the concept of digital highways is very dear and important to us. Those digital highways are effectively our way to say to our clients, to our communities, to our regulators, that we are helping our economies have the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that is required for our economies to become part of the 21st century digital economy, to join the fourth industrial revolution, to not miss a heartbeat in being able to compete with local talent in the worldwide markets via being connected. This, in turn, has given us a sense that we are working for all our stakeholders. And every time I do a town hall to our 20,000 plus employees, I make sure that we speak to our employees of how we are doing for what we call our four stakeholders, so that we understand that a company that is doing the business, the purpose of building digital infrastructure, really answers to four key stakeholders. Number one, of course, is our investor base. All of our capital gets raised in markets that are not in Bolivia, Paraguay, or even Colombia. 70% of our entire debt gets financed in the capital worldwide markets. And entirely all of our equity is owned by Boston, US, Canada funds. By definition, there's no way that these investments can be financed by the local capital markets. So number one among our stakeholders, and this is for the other stakeholders to also understand, are our investors. And the reason for that is if we don't provide a return, there is no money to build the next wave of digital highways that we need to keep these communities connected. And this is important because I tire not of saying there is no sustainability if there's no return. Very clear. Stakeholder number two are our own workers, the individuals who do everything every day. And this became particularly obvious during the pandemic, when they got a stronger sense of purpose, around the world, by the way, that what they did was essential for people to remain connected. We told them, your job's protected, because now is when that purpose of keeping those communities connected becomes real. Now that's our second stakeholder. We put a lot of emphasis in creating a very strong culture. We call it Sangre Tigo, to make sure that our employees take a lot of pride in what they're doing, in the purpose of what we have. And of course, our clients, we measure NPS all around, because without happy clients, there ain't going to be a return. And largely, our fourth stakeholder are our communities at large, represented by our regulators or the governments with whom we speak every day, and who basically outsource to the private sector the building of the key infrastructure. And this is important for us to understand. Most governments don't outsource the building of airports or highways or ports, and that's where the real economy goes through, the tomatoes and the lettuces and the clothing. But we build the infrastructure that is required for the digital economy. So that dialogue, that understanding by the governments of the countries we operate in, that we are good for the development of those digital economies is very, very important. This journey then went through building a purpose, speaking clearly of something that makes sense to all of our four stakeholders, and communicating it loudly, boldly, not only externally, but mostly internally, so that all employees have a sense that what we do is meaningful to the development of their communities. And as I said earlier, this was very, very important during the pandemic, and it gave the company such a sense of pride that later on, we became one of the great places to work, not only in Latin America, number two, but also worldwide. Tiny little Tigo, tiny little Millicom is the fifth place, great place to work for in Latin America. Now, when we were ready to make these net zero and ESG commitments, because we thought we had the purpose, the stakeholder view, the commitment for our employees, we went in boldly earlier this year. And we put out the net zero commitments that I just described. So that's how we got to where we are today. How do we go from here then to fulfilling these commitments? This is the second how. The first how was, how do we got here? The second how is, where do we go from here? The first and most important thing, and this was my prior invitation to many other companies, is to make the commitment, to walk the talk, to put a goal out there that serves as the direction you are going through. And in a company that is run by engineers, which is our company, run by business people, they can't work. They just can't get up a single morning and not have a goal. So giving them a goal makes it real, makes it achievable, can be split up in baby steps. It's not a 2030, 2050 goal. It's got an interim goal every year, which then makes it achievable, realistical, measurable, and it gives us the need to measure it on a yearly basis. Now, we're focused initially on scope 1 and 2 emissions, because those are the ones that we can control ourselves, the ones that are being caused directly by the activity we do to light up networks to provide cable, pay TV, broadband, and mobile services. And our strategy there, good or bad, is to be, number one part of the strategy, more efficient in what we do. Bandwidth across fixed networks and across mobile networks increases, pandemic or not pandemic, 30 to 50% more on a yearly basis. Depends on what country you are, what business you are, but every individual consumes 30 to 40% more than they did before. That's a challenge. You gotta be able to put out production that is 30 to 40% more than what you did the year before, without that creating a 30 to 40% increase in your carbon footprint. So if you're not very efficient on the networks, you ain't gonna make it. So the key to this is to make your networks keep up with modernization. So the last 3 to 4 years, we've modernized all of our mobile networks in all of our 9 countries, simply because they will allow us to produce that bit. By the way, that's what we do. We produce bits that you move around networks. To produce that bit at a much lower carbon footprint. And just to summarize, the goal is for us to be able to give digital consumption to low penetration economies in Honduras and El Salvador that want 30, 40% on an individual basis, but of which there are still 50% that are not using broadband. To do that without increasing in the same proportion our carbon footprint. The only way to do that is by becoming more efficient. Because we've modernized our networks, this last year, 2021, which is the one I can give public information for, consumption went up by almost 30%, but our footprint went up only by 9%. Our carbon footprint went up only by 9%. So efficiency is a key tool. And when you give this to engineers, they believe in it, because now they're proud. Boss, we gave you 30% more consumption, but our footprint was only up 9%. That's efficiency. Now, that ain't going to get the job done fully. It will ensure that part of it is done, but you still have to decarbonize as much as you possibly can the network. And to that, we're basically using 3 mechanisms. And if somebody has better ideas, I'll be happy to listen to them. But the ones we've come up with are power purchase agreements, which help us work with companies that are launching renewable energy products. And because we're one of the larger companies in all the markets we operate in, and because we consume energy significantly, of course that our agreements are meaningful to help bolster those markets. We're doing that in Panama. The second mechanism is the use of renewable certificates, renewable energy certificates, which have the same purpose, different mechanism, but have the same purpose. They basically help bolster the markets for renewables in the market. And we're trying those out in Colombia. And the third mechanism we're using to make sure that these goals are met is we are putting some of those mobile sites that carry the bits that I'm referring to, the ones that are further out in locations in which getting energy to them is very, very difficult, we're actually moving them off grid, putting power solar panels on them because the amount of traffic that they carry is so limited that we can power them with alternative sources of energy. And that's not a small number. That's already 1,200 sites that we are putting to that end. These are the mechanisms that we are using in the countries that are not developed countries so that we are able to do what our goal is, to be able to deliver more bits while fulfilling our commitment to being carbon neutral down the road. Now, I mentioned scope 3 goals and targets, and I have to be very honest with you, those will be the hardest because those will require us to work with our consumers, help them join the effort, and our suppliers. And with everything that basically touches a full value chain, there's going to be a lot of coordination that is required. Because the goal is to provide, and I hope you understand this, the good that we produce is good for the businesses, is good for the economies that we operate in. We want to produce more digital to help our economies develop. So we want to produce more bits, not less. But we also want to be better for the environment, not worse. And the only way to really do this will be to work deeply with the entire value chain in order to be able to do that. That's going to be much, much harder, but of course, we'll find a way to be committed to that. Now, I'm very, very optimistic that we as an industry will get there because of places like this, because of forums like this, because of CEOs that are also participating in these efforts, and investors that are supportive. You cannot do this as a public company if the public market doesn't support you, if your board doesn't support you. So going forward, this won't really happen. More bits, not less. Better environmental, not worse. If we don't focus our effort on educating communities and individuals down the supply chain and up the supply chain about this. And to that, we believe we must educate just about everyone we can in our community. We got programs out there to educate children and women entrepreneurs on the use of digital, and those programs include the importance of keeping an eye out on the environment. And we're also talking to governments about changing 2 paradigms before I get kicked out of here. One is we're getting this all wrong when it comes to the use of spectrum, and we're getting all the wrong when we come to the use of industry structures. It used to be that companies in the telecom business could invest a lot because they were getting great returns on investment. And as a result of that, spectrum was a way for governments to get resources that could be used for other purposes. If digital is so important, then governments, regulators, the entire ecosystem must come to the understanding that spectrum has to be put to work for a better digital economy so that we can use the money that otherwise would be funneled to spectrum payments to make better networks, more efficient networks. And countries like Sweden and New Zealand and Mauritius are actually doing that. 5G spectrum is being handed to operators for free, with the view, and with this I'll finish, that by doing this, you will have more digital economies, better used capacity, and less carbon footprint. Thank you so much.